Dawntrail is the best Final Fantasy XIV expansion I've played. Let's break it down. As we approach a full year since the release of this expansion, I thought that it would be the perfect time to reflect on Dawntrail now that some of its lasting contributions to the game have been implemented. Not to mention, the shock of the narrative's decline in quality is further behind us, so it's easier to approach the topic of Final Fantasy XIV's unfolding story with a more level head. Dawntrail is an incredibly complicated expansion to talk about because while the title of the video does reflect my earnest feelings, two things can be true at once, and it is also my opinion that Dawntrail is the worst expansion I've played, in some respects. You might be wondering, wait, how can it be that it's the best and the worst? You'll find out, but this is a video essay, not a tweet, so get comfortable and let me cook. My name's Ember, and this is Dawntrail is the best FF14 expansion I've played. Get all videos 2 days early and ad-free for only $1 a month on Patreon or YouTube memberships. It's the best deal in town. For context, it's important to note that I'm someone who came to Final Fantasy XIV late in its life cycle. I started during Shadowbringers, so my perspective of the game isn't that of a seasoned veteran. I've played the game for more than a few years now, but there seems to be almost a generational difference between people like me, who are relative newcomers to the ecosystem, and players who remember that there used to be a third resource bar in the game. Because of that, I've only lived through one complete expansion cycle, Endwalker, which I think of less and less fondly as time goes on. Arguably, the most impactful piece of content added during that expansion was the Adventure Plate, maybe Crystalline Conflict. Island Sanctuary was a dud, and it seems that the developers have decided to ignore the potential that Criterion dungeons presented to the endgame offerings of Final Fantasy XIV. Endwalker was so boring, in fact, that it's the reason for this channel's existence, since making videos about 14 was more interesting than logging in to fall asleep halfway through an expert dungeon. As exciting as experiencing the conclusion to 14's 10-year story arc was, I couldn't deny how disappointing it felt to finally be present for a new expansion from day one, only to be forced to sit through the god-awful Hildebrand quest for a relic weapon which amounted to nothing more than a tombstone grind. Endwalker was bad, so when I say that Dawntrail is the best FF14 expansion I've played, keep in mind that the bar is low. The only thing that Dawntrail would have had to do to exceed Endwalker, in my opinion, was literally anything more than the bare minimum. An MMORPG needs content that inspires organic player congregation in a shared environment. That is the essence of the genre. Without that, then the game is missing the first M in the name of the genre. Dawntrail has, without a doubt, contributed more content which bolsters that massively multiplayer feel than Endwalker did. It represents a concerted effort to make Final Fantasy XIV feel more like an MMO rather than the constrained queuing simulator that I've come to know it as. The content on offer has addressed one of 14's biggest issues, which is the distance between turning the game on and actually playing it. This is a massive issue for a number of MMOs in the market, and it's one of the reasons that this genre has a difficult time competing with live service games which have a massive play button that flings you directly into the action. Final Fantasy XIV has a huge distance between logging into the game and using your abilities, which is crazy to me. Even with the game's garbage netcode, pressing buttons in 14 feels fantastic, so it should be the developer's foremost priority to reduce the distance between launching the game and beating the shit out of an eldritch monstrosity as much as possible. Dawntrail has done a great deal to break the habit of logging in, queuing for a dungeon, and waiting to play a video game. The Occult Crescent, in my opinion, is the best thing to ever happen to Final Fantasy XIV. In the week following its release, I've had the most fun I've had in all of my years playing this game. I spent an entire evening grinding gold with a group of friends, and it was riveting. We were thoughtfully moving through a space, being careful about higher level enemies as we made our way towards the next grinding spot. We had to carefully manage our cooldowns because the enemies were dangerous enough to offer a credible threat. Sometimes we pulled more than we could handle and we died. What a novel concept, a failure state in Final Fantasy XIV. When I published my video, The Problem with Yoshi-P, some of the things that I mentioned about Creative Studio 3's game design under Yoshida was its total aversion towards exploration, dangerous enemies in the wilderness, and interactivity with the world, among other things. A lot of that has been directly addressed in the Occult Crescent, even if the improvements aren't revolutionary. Exploration is, to some extent, a primary component of the gameplay experience in this zone. Enemies are dangerous if you wander into areas that you aren't prepared to confront. There are survey points, treasure chests, carrots, scavenger hunts. These things require that you look at the world and interact with it directly, rather than simply staring at a boss's health bar or your own cooldowns. It's a step toward a version of Final Fantasy XIV that I've been dreaming of since I saw the announcement trailer for Dawntrail. I hoped against hope that Creative Studio 3 would break from the conventional campaign structure and give us something like the Occult Crescent as the primary leveling experience. Why wouldn't we want to explore the wilderness of this new continent? Why wouldn't we want to hunt down the Tural Vidral with other players or search for hidden treasures behind waterfalls? Now, you might be thinking to yourself, we already have field operations in the game. This isn't new. You'd be correct. We more than certainly do have 2 other field operations in the game, but consider this. They're dated and they're level synced to their respective expansions, which sucks. In the Occult Crescent, I have access to my job's complete toolset and I'm progressing in the interest of the current expansion. I didn't buy Dawntrail to spend my time playing in Stormblood. I can earn better equipment, for example, and while it isn't the best in slot, it's something. Putting on stronger armor and seeing seeing bigger numbers pop up whenever I hit my buttons is a crucial component to MMORPG game design. It's important for players who don't have the inclination to engage with Savage to also have the experience of earning better gear in a fun way. The Occult Crescent makes Final Fantasy XIV feel like an MMORPG for the first time since I played the game in Shadowbringers. It's a humongous win, and it elevates Dawntrail above Endwalker on its own. That isn't even mentioning cosmic exploration, which I think is also fantastic, although I'm not as interested in crafting and gathering as I am in killing monsters. As of right now, I have to admit that patch 7.25 is my favorite version of Final Fantasy XIV, but as I look at Dawntrail in its current state, I can't help but wonder, how is it that it took nearly a full year to get this? I continue to be astonished at Creative Studio 3's obsession with its production pipeline. For a studio that seems entirely disinterested in anything beyond the scope of the stringent development parameters that have been set for the ongoing production of Final Fantasy XIV, I am shocked at how slowly these content updates reach paying customers. And when they do, that they consistently fail in terms of imagination, innovation, and intrigue. While I personally love the Occult Crescent, it isn't without a few glaring issues. For example, fates are abysmal for anyone who hasn't earned enough silver to purchase a riding map. Even if you have the faster mount speed, fates vanish almost instantly. You will miss them if you aren't sitting at an aetheryte and watching the map like a hawk. Giving fates a 60-second delay would somewhat alleviate this issue, because as of now, the most efficient way to progress in the Occult Crescent is to cast return after every fate, which undermines one of the foremost benefits of the content, playing in an open communal space. In addition, it doesn't seem as though performance matters during fates or critical encounters. You could be dead and on the floor for the duration of a fight and be rewarded all the same. While it is fun to earn better gear and to level up phantom jobs, it ultimately feels futile, since the Fork Tower isn't an easily accessible space in which to experience the reward of your personal progression. You'll grind fates and critical encounters to upgrade your equipment and your phantom jobs, only to continue to grind the same content. In general, the Occult Crescent doesn't feel like a piece of content that should have required nearly an additional year of development. It's fun, don't get me wrong, but it isn't impressive enough to justify being released halfway through the expansion cycle. How is it possible that it feels like Dawntrail only released last month, after nearly a full year of service and hundreds of dollars in subscription fees? For those of you who have remained subscribed, you're only beginning to see the content that you've been paying for. While I'm happy with Cosmic Exploration and the Occult Crescent, I'm not sure that it's worth $150. One of the only reasons that I'm willing to say that Dawntrail has been my favorite experience with Final Fantasy XIV is likely because I haven't been subscribed for the complete duration of the expansion, so I don't feel as though I've been subsidizing a game developer out of the kindness of my heart rather than in exchange for a service. Still, it must be said that Dawntrail has taken at least one step at alleviating the issue of content pacing. The inclusion of a chaotic alliance raid is precisely the kind of experimentation that I want to see from Creative Studio 3. While it seems that the community has largely moved on from the fight, it was something new, and it offered players a way to earn meaningful gear upgrades outside of Savage. I get the feeling that due to the lack of engagement in chaotic during 7.2, Creative Studio 3 will interpret it as something of a failure, but I sincerely hope that they continue to repurpose old content with modern gameplay challenges for players to tackle in between major content drops. That's the kind of scrappy and resourceful development work that this studio needs, especially if their pipeline is so strict and the resources so diminished that it's impossible to build new content from scratch. Use what's already there to fill in the gaps between major patches. There shouldn't be content droughts in a game that receives a monthly stipend from hundreds of thousands of players. I am still incredibly disappointed in the way that Creative Studio 3 handles its content output, but I am, for the most part, glad to see content like Cosmic Exploration and the Occult Crescent, which feel like they're built to last and built to bring people together. If the developers can sprinkle in bold ways to repurpose dated assets similar to the Chaotic Alliance raid, then 14 will feel a bit more like a live service game rather than a dead one. Unfortunately, I can't revisit Dawntrail as the topic of a video essay without discussing the story, and as willing as I am to praise the current state of the game, 14's narrative is arguably the most crucial component of its identity. It is impossible to overstate how much damage the narrative of Dawntrail has done to 14. With almost a full year to reflect on the expansion's main story quest, along with two significant additions to the story in 7.1 and 7.2, I have to say that I feel only ambivalence when I think about seeing this icon again. I don't dread it anymore because I know that Wuk'd Lamat will fade into the background soon enough, but Wuk'd Lamat wasn't Dawntrail's only problem. I'd like to present an idea to you that you might find offensive. I mentioned it in my previous video on Final Fantasy XIV, but I'd like to discuss it more here. Final Fantasy XIV's story is never going to be good again. The feeling that Shadowbringers gave you will remain sealed in that moment in time, never to be repeated. I'm afraid to say, guys, it was in fact a fluke. It's my opinion that 14's writing issues began back in Shadowbringers, but that is a topic for a different essay. The reality is that the writers at Creative Studio 3 have decided to take the game's tone in a more palatable palatable and inoffensive direction, which demands the dissolution of thematic substance, character development, and the strength of its world building. Now that we're at a point in the game's story in which Lamat is playing a smaller role in the narrative, it's become more apparent than ever the magnitude of damage that character inflicted on this game's quality and reputation. Since I began playing Final Fantasy XIV, I maintained an active subscription through the most lifeless periods in Endwalker's history. Even then, I never closed my account. Lamat was largely responsible for breaking that streak because she not only represented a failure in character writing, she represented a complete breakdown of quality assurance in the production pipeline of the development of the game. I fully understand what I'm inviting by saying what I'm about to say, but I'm gonna say it anyway. The casting and directing of Senna Breyer in the role of Lamat was one of the greatest mistakes that Creative Studio 3 has ever made in its history, and it is truly unthinkable that at no point during the development of Dawntrail, someone didn't stop and say, this isn't working. In a game with a decade-long pedigree of unforgettable vocal performances nested within lovingly crafted stories, the hiring of Senna Breyer as Lamat represents a complete breakdown in trust that denigrates an entire digital ecosystem that was painstakingly rescued from complete collapse at the 11th hour by a passionate, dedicated, and most importantly, competent team of developers. It demonstrates a total abandonment of competence to cast someone who lacks the requisite skill to perform at an acceptable level in the lead role of an expansion that nearly rivals the length of Endwalker. Now, you might be saying, that's unfair, it's not the fault of the performer, it's the fault of the vocal director. To that, I would say two things can be true at once. And even then, whoever is to blame, it doesn't matter. The result of Dawntrail's narrative was the displacement of players' emotional investment in Final Fantasy XIV in one fell swoop. What does that mean? I'll break it down for you. For many players across a multitude of expansions, the primary motivator for investing in this ecosystem over any other was the narrative. If you bought into the world building and if you cared about the cast, then it was exciting to just exist here, even if you didn't have anything to do. That's why I kept paying for my subscription throughout the duration of Endwalker, and I'm confident that many of you can sympathize. Dawntrail ripped that primary motivator out of its foremost position. Without the strength of the narrative, you either bow out altogether or you find a different motivation to play the game. Either way, many players lost that feeling of excitement that came from just being in the world, making it much, much easier to leave. I have a hot take for you. It's my opinion that Dawntrail will be remembered as one of the best expansions in the history of Final Fantasy XIV, even in spite of its unimaginable drop in narrative quality. The encounter designs across the board are fun to engage with, and the shift in focus towards more communal content is precisely what the game needed to feel less like an underbaked single-player RPG and more like an MMO. I've got to be honest, I've had the most fun I've ever had in 14 while grinding in the Occult Crescent. I can't deny that truly, Dawntrail has been the best FF14 expansion I've played. In a way, I'm kind of disappointed that this expansion has been such a banger because it is tied to one of the worst stories I've ever played in a video game. If 14 is somehow enjoying more player retention than ever before due to its content offerings, then I'm afraid that Creative Studio 3 will interpret that as a sign that they can continue offering stories on par with Dawntrail, since people are demonstrating that they'll continue to play in spite of the drop in quality. If I wasn't so entrenched in Final Fantasy XIV's ecosystem, and if I didn't feel such an intense attachment to my character, my experiences, and my friends in the game, then I would be wiser to spend my money on an ecosystem with a quality offering that's commensurate to its cost. Final Fantasy XIV simply does not meet that standard, in my opinion. There are games that charge you nothing while offering vastly more content at a faster cadence and a higher standard of quality. With that knowledge, it seems ridiculous that I continue to play this one, but what are you gonna do? You like what you like. At this point in time, we're closer to the end of Dawntrail than we are to the beginning. It'll be interesting to see what the general consensus about the quality of this expansion is when we're finally exploring 6 more lifeless zones in Maricidia, mentoring Wuk'd and confronting yet another ancient civilization that wants to destroy the world. Either way, as of now, I'm glad that Dawntrail finally launched out of early access a couple of weeks ago and that there's something to do. I know it doesn't always sound like it, but I am rooting for Final Fantasy XIV. The game suffered a heavy blow after releasing one of the worst stories in the history of video games, starring one of the most disastrously embarrassing vocal performances in the history of voice acting. The damage, unfortunately, is done. I am completely checked out of the game's world. I am skipping every cutscene from here on out. I could not care less. The only thing that Creative Studio 3 can do to keep players like me interested, in my opinion, is to make the game fun. And I don't think that they're incapable of creating fun. The Occult Crescent and Cosmic Exploration are testaments to their ability to actually develop a video game. But it's clear that ever since Endwalker, the bar has been on the floor. Dawntrail has simply met the bare minimum expectation for a costly live service game, which is why it's the best expansion I've played. That's not good. That's being the best by technicality. And I don't think that's good enough. That's the video, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, then leave me a like and don't forget to subscribe for more MMO content. It's the best way to help the channel reach new people. I know this video got a little spicy, so don't hold back. Let me know what you think in the comments. A shout out to my sponsors on Patreon, JG Chowder and Lammy, who helped make this video possible. Remember, you can get all videos 2 days early and ad-free for only $1 a month on Patreon or YouTube memberships. It's the best deal in town. Follow me with the relevant links on screen. Otherwise, I will see you all next week, Thursday at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time with another video. Minding my manners, of course. Thanks for watching.